Part 1 of Chapter 4 of Totem and Taboo by Sigmund Freud. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 4 The Infantile Recurrence of Totemism. Part 1 The reader need not fear that psychoanalysis, which first revealed the regular overdetermination of psychic acts and formations, will be tempted to derive anything so complicated as religion from a single source. If it necessarily seeks, as in duty bound, to gain recognition for one of the sources of this institution, it by no means claims exclusiveness for this source or even first rank among the concurring factors. Only a synthesis from various fields of research can decide what relative importance in the genesis of religion is to be assigned to the mechanism which we are to discuss, but such a task exceeds the means as well as the intentions of the psychoanalyst. Section 1. The first chapter of this book made us acquainted with the conception of totemism. We heard that totemism is a system which takes the place of religion among certain primitive races in Australia, America, and Africa, and furnishes the basis of social organization. We know that in 1869 the Scotchman MacLennan attracted general interest to the phenomena of totemism, which until then had been considered merely as curiosities, by his conjecture that a large number of customs and usages in various old as well as modern societies were to be taken as remnants of a totemic epoch. Science has since then fully recognized this significance of totemism. I quote a passage from The Elements of the Psychology of Races by W. Wundt, 1912, as the latest utterance in this question. Taking all this together, it becomes highly probable that a totemic culture was at one time the preliminary stage of every later evolution, as well as a transition stage between the state of primitive man and the age of gods and heroes." It is necessary for the purposes of this chapter to go more deeply into the nature of totemism. For reasons that will be evident later, I here give preference to an outline by S. Reinach, who in the year 1900 sketched the following Code de Totemisme in 12 articles, like a catechism of the totemic religion. 1. Certain animals must not be killed or eaten, but men bring up individual animals of these species and take care of them. 2. An animal that dies accidentally is mourned and buried with the same honors as a member of the tribe. 3. The prohibition as to eating sometimes refers only to a certain part of the animal. 4. If pressure of necessity compels the killing of an animal usually spared, it is done with excuses to the animal, and the attempt is made to mitigate the violation of the taboo, namely the killing, through various tricks and evasions. 5. If the animal is sacrificed by ritual, it is solemnly mourned. 6. At specified solemn occasions, like religious ceremonies, the skins of certain animals are donned. Where totemism still exists, these are totem animals. 7. Tribes and individuals assume the names of totem animals. 8. Many tribes use pictures of animals as coats of arms and decorate their weapons with them. The men paint animal pictures on their bodies or have them tattooed. 9. If the totem is one of the feared and dangerous animals, it is assumed that the animal will spare the members of the tribe named after it. 10. The totem animal protects and warns the members of the tribe. 11. The totem animal foretells the future to those faithful to it and serves as their leader. 12. The members of a totem tribe often believe that they are connected with the totem animal by the bond of common origin. The value of this catechism of the totem religion can be more appreciated if one bears in mind that Reinach has here also incorporated all the signs and clues which lead to the conclusion that the totemic system had once existed. The peculiar attitude of this author to the problem is shown by the fact that to some extent he neglects the essential traits of totemism, and we shall see that of the two main tenets of the totemistic catechism he has forced one into the background and completely lost sight of the other. In order to get a more correct picture of the characteristics of totemism, we turn to an author who has devoted 4 volumes to the theme, combining the most complete collection of the observations in question with the most thorough discussion of the problems they raise. We shall remain indebted to J. G. Frazer, the author of Totemism and Exogamy, for the pleasure and information he affords, even though psychoanalytic investigation may lead us to results which differ widely from his. Footnote. But it may be well to show the reader beforehand how difficult it is to establish the facts in this field. In the first place, those who collect the observations are not identical with those who digest and discuss them. The first are travelers and missionaries, while the others are scientific men who perhaps have never seen the object of their research. It is not easy to establish an understanding with savages. Not all the observers were familiar with the languages, but had to use the assistance of interpreters, or else had to communicate with the people they questioned in the auxiliary language of Pidgin English. Savages are not communicative about the most intimate affairs of their culture, and unburden themselves only to those foreigners who have passed many years in their midst. From various motives they often give wrong or misleading information. Compare Frazer, The Beginnings of Religion and Totemism Among the Australian Aborigines, Fortnightly Review 1905, Totemism and Exogamy, Volume 1, page 150. It must not be forgotten that primitive races are not young races, but really are as old as the most civilized, and that we have no right to expect that they have preserved their original ideas and institutions for our information without any evolution or distortion. It is certain, on the contrary, that far-reaching changes in all directions have taken place among primitive races, so that we can never unhesitatingly decide which of their present conditions and opinions have preserved the original past, having remained petrified as it were, and which represent a distortion and change of the original. It is due to this that one meets the many disputes among authors as to what proportion of the peculiarities of a primitive culture is to be taken as primary and what as a later and secondary manifestation. To establish the original conditions, therefore, always remains a matter of construction. Finally, it is not easy to adapt oneself to the ways of thinking of primitive races, for like children we easily misunderstand them, and are always inclined to interpret their acts and feelings according to our own psychic constellations. End footnote. A totem, wrote Frazer in his first essay, is a class of material objects which a savage regards with superstitious respect, believing that there exists between him and every member of the class an intimate and altogether special relation. The connection between a person and his totem is mutually beneficent. The totem protects the man, and the man shows his respect for the totem in various ways, by not killing it if it be an animal, and not cutting or gathering it if it be a plant. As distinguished from a fetish, a totem is never an isolated individual, but always a class of objects, generally a species of animals or of plants, more rarely a class of inanimate natural objects, very rarely a class of artificial objects." At least these last 3 kinds of totem can be distinguished. 1. The tribal totem, which a whole tribe shares, and which is hereditary from generation to generation. 2. The sex totem, which belongs to all the masculine or feminine members of a tribe to the exclusion of the opposite sex. And 3. The individual totem, which belongs to the individual and does not descend to his successors. The last 2 kinds of totem are of comparatively little importance compared to the tribal totem. Unless we are mistaken, they are recent formations and of little importance as far as the nature of the taboo is concerned. The tribal totem or clan totem is the object of veneration of a group of men and women who take their name from the totem and consider themselves consanguineous offspring of a common ancestor, and who are firmly associated with each other through common obligations towards each other as well as by the belief in their totem. Totemism is a